Hi, welcome to Break Time with Brakeman. I have with me today Darlene Lombos, who is the principal officer for the Greater Boston Central Labor Council. She is the first woman of color to hold this position, and she has been in this position since February. She's formerly worked with the Community Labor United for 13 years and is doing a terrific job in Boston, raising the profile of the Central Labor Council and really making some important connections about the intersectionalities between the labor movement and other movements. So, Darlene, thank you for being here, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your vision for this new role for yourself.
Thanks so much, Bev. And thanks for having me on your Break Time with Bev. I love that. That's a great title. So my name, again, my name's Darlene, and I actually come out of community organizing. I started doing work back in Portland, Oregon for a group called Sisters in Action for Power. It was a direct action, very small women and girls group, mostly women of color that took on various issues around gentrification, around sexual harassment, around privatization of schools. And we organized our communities and had a very structured leadership development program to support women and girls to take action in their neighborhoods and in their communities on issues that they care about. So when I came to Boston, I started working at Community Labor United as a way to really bring together different organizations that were working very much like Sisters in Action for Power here in Boston, community organizations like the Chinese Progressive Association, New England United for Justice, City La Vida Urbana, and brought them together with unions who were working on similar issues and taking on broader policy and corporate campaigns together. So now at the Greater Boston Labor Council, it really is important, given that I'm the first woman, I'm the first person of color to be the principal officer, how important that is in this political moment, given that in unions, it is a very exciting time. I think there's lots of public rhetoric out there that says that unions are actually on the decline because of our percentages of members has declined over the last 30 years. Lots of reasons for that, particularly the attack from the right. But now we have more women and people of color, about 67% in unions. This is an important time for unions servicing women and people of color. New membership is primarily workers under 35. That's another exciting development here in the labor movement. So it's important and exciting for me to be running a council that has over 100,000 union members and their families that represent just a spectrum of 163 different unions. You have janitors and firefighters and nurses and hotel workers and building trades. And in Boston, we have really strong density and are very fortunate to have a mayor that actually comes out of the labor movement as well. So during this crisis, we've just been having a lot of success in working with our local government around that.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about some of the areas of growth in the labor movement and how, the importance of sort of lifting up. I mean, if there was ever a time where the stark reality of those workers we most undervalue, underpay, and under-resource are the ones that are really holding together the economy. They're the ones that we go to the gas station and, purchase gas from. They're the grocery store workers, the nursing home aides, personal care aides, nurses. So talk about, if you can, some of the opportunities in that and the challenges that you see and your vision as a woman of color, which, I am so proud of as one of only 2 women on an international executive board in an auto union. I really admire the fact that you have this position and the work that I know you're capable of doing.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I lift up just the important perspectives that women and people of color have in the labor movement, it gives us an opportunity to look at issues a little bit more holistically, that it's not just workers that are in the workplace, but it's an opportunity to look at issues that workers are dealing with in their communities. As women and people of color, we often are the ones building and strengthening our communities around renters' rights and climate justice and immigration reform. And so what's incredibly important around the labor movement today is that we're seeing issues that intersect and that we're part of a larger social justice movement, and bringing our perspective to the table. And especially with workers under the age of 35 too, given that 20% of our economy here in the US is now in the financial sector. That actually means, I mean, people know this, I know, that we're not actually making money off of necessarily products. It's making, these financial institutions are making money off of debt and moving money around with fancy algorithms and things that are not actually helping people, but actually just moving that debt around. And so this generation, young people under the age of 35 that are workers, understand debt more than any other generation before us. And so they'll bring a different kind of perspective on challenging capital and challenging the financial sector that is really just sucking the wealth out of our individuals, our communities, and our government. And that's exciting, because that does mean that we have all these different ways to think about growing the labor movement. Yes, we do have to take on new organizing. Yes, there's just a growing sense of militancy, starting with the teachers' unions and other workers in grocery stores. But this is a trend that was even before Corona. And so this idea of actually supporting, having teachers actually support more than just obviously workers' wages and benefits, but this was about, in many strikes, teachers' strikes across the country before Corona, this was about community support and about what was going on with families in their neighborhoods, and not just about the basic wages and benefits that I think people think that unions are fighting for. It's much more than that. And and that gives us, that's why it's so important to lift that up, as even before this COVID-19, the rise of militant strikes and momentum that we were building even before that, and the importance of unionization.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And it also allows us to work with different formations. I mean, there are worker centers here locally in Boston. We're very fortunate to have some incredible worker centers who are working directly with the Labor Council, organizing workers that don't have a union, that are working on wage theft issues. The Chinese Progressive Association has a worker center, the Brazilian Worker Center, Matahari Women's Worker Center, and Mascosh also has one that is working primarily with immigrants as well, to file wage theft cases, to fight direct employers in the restaurant industry when there isn't huge density for unionization there. There's been gatherings at Pride at Work of folks who are working in grocery stores like Whole Foods, and they're supporting workers at a different level. So it's an exciting time to think about different kinds of formations that then will partner with unions and the labor movement to actually move a different kind of agenda for the working class.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit, we have a couple minutes. Tell me about the worker centers. What do they look like, and how are they funded, and what's the work, how are we connecting with them?
Well, so before, I think of so much now before Corona and after Corona. So before Corona, actually, the Brazilian Worker Center specifically was working on a wage theft campaign with the state AFL-CIO, and moving forward a bill that would actually hold employers accountable at the very top, so that the subcontracting and outsourcing would actually be something that workers themselves would be able to identify employers, not just their direct contractor, but all the way up to the top, who benefited the most from that labor Right now, the Brazilian Worker Center is now handing out food and opened up a food pantry because the need is so dire. These are immigrant workers who may not have any other means of providing for their families and are now out of work. The Chinese Progressive Association is a really good example of how they worked with 1199 to organize immigrant workers, Chinese immigrant speaking workers in medical resources on home health care. And it was an incredible campaign, and this was pre-corona, where they organized Chinese immigrants to join the union and work with SEIU 1199, and they actually, 1199, hired one of Chinese Progressive Association's organizers to then work for the union. Incredible relationship there, and helped build APALA, the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, and 1199 and Local 26 are big players, or big unions that support that work, along with BTU. Jessica Tang is the first woman to also run the Boston Teachers Union. So Chinese Progressive Association Worker Center helps to anchor APALA with both Jessica and I and Local 26 and 1199 workers, Asian workers. But after Corona, CPA is taking on a lot of different issues. They're working on a reopening town hall to talk to workers about how these are mostly non-union workers, how they would want to see the reopening happening, given that the governor did not include any workers or unions as part of his reopening committee. And so we're saying that we will work with our mayor, who has a seat to help be the voice for workers there, and also to have our own reopening plans that will lift up workers at the center in health and safety. So there's a lot of great work going on with worker centers, with some of our constituency groups like Pride at Work and APALA and APRI, and which is helping us to broaden the labor movement in very different ways than we've seen before.
Yeah. Well, that's really great. I mean, Darlene, I don't know you well, but I've gotten to know you through your Women Labor Leaders virtual get together, and your work with us at Harvard and at Boston College. And, you know, we really appreciate your energy, and I look forward to continuing to work with you and actually learning from you and learning new ideas on how to broaden the labor movement, because it's hard. You know, it's institutionally a movement that I would argue is somewhat resistant to change in some areas. So having new leaders like you is really, really important, and I look forward to being able to work with you. So, any last things you want to say before we end?
The only thing is that we'd love to feature. So we're doing a series of once and even twice a week called Frontline Heroes. It's a way to lift up some of the essential workers that are on the front lines right now. And we've featured grocery store workers, maintenance crews, janitors, cleaners, and we really would love to lift up any workers you have on the front lines, and especially lifting up the issues that people are still seeing as reopening plans are starting to meld and starting to develop, especially with the need for protective gear and hazard pay. All those things are still, and anti-retaliation of workers. This is all still in the works, and would love to lift that up for if you have any folks that you want to lift up in our Frontline Heroes series.
I have some ideas, and we'll talk after. So anyway,
excellent.
Thank you so much, Darlene.
Thank you.
Stay healthy and safe during this time.